Hi, welcome back to the table. I'm Scott,
I'm Layten.
and we're here to give you your Tactical Tuesday tip. And unfortunately, what have they been doing wrong this whole time?
Deploying.
You've been deploying wrong this entire time. The good news is we're here to help you learn how to do it right. So let's jump over to the table.
For deployment, we have two different types of armies. We're going to have shooting and melee armies. These two armies, they deploy differently, and this is mainly based on their specialty. So shooting armies, they're going to focus more on shooting lanes. They're probably going to want to deploy back farther. A lot of problems I've seen in tournaments is where shooting armies deploy right up at the front of the line, not knowing this thing called threat range. Threat range is usually including the movement and max charge range. So for this example, we have 24 inches from this deployment zone to that deployment zone. Normal units that move 6 inches and can charge 12, because every unit can charge 12. That's 18 inches. That will not reach here. But then you have special units that move faster and that can hit hard. You're not going to want to be in the front line if a melee army is deploying here, especially if you're a shooting army and you're kind of squishy.
Good example of the longer threat ranges would be a land raider, where you can put a unit in, it can move, then the models can get out and they can go. You're talking with a group of Terminators like Abaddon and friends. You're looking at about a 34-inch threat range, which goes clear across the lines here and across most maps. Layton's point here, they can get completely across the line, and if you give them an object to put the charge against, your shooting army is going to get decimated.
I've destroyed Tau armies and other squishy armies that deployed up there not knowing the concept of threat range. That can be its video itself, but this is how you deploy to avoid getting in a bad position turn one. You're going to want to avoid deploying in corners. A bad thing is I've seen a Tau player, they deployed their stuff all in these two corners, and they had a building in the way where they couldn't fly back forward, which made their movement really hard, and they're kind of stuck in the corner. They would have to take a whole turn to get on the terrain, and then another turn to get in the center. So that brings me to my main point. You're going to want to deploy in the center. So then you can go whichever way you're needed. If you can, this goes to a huge thing we'll be talking about a lot, defeat in detail. If you can choose what fights what, you already won. Warhammer comes down to mainly positioning. A lot of people don't realize, but in tournaments, you usually spend at least a half an hour of your game time deploying. So for this example, we got a melee army versus a shooting army. We're going to give you a quick round of deployment real quick. I would usually deploy my trucks here or here, because they have a scary elite unit inside, hide them from the firing lanes. And then also, if they are in range, there's not enough units that could fit in that lane to shoot at the truck that I know it could kill. This helps my threat range not get popped, and units that are inside don't die. If they do, I need to make sure I have more units that can capitalize on the required movement. So such as if we had crisis suits over there and they popped over here first turn and shot my truck, I would have units here to capitalize on that. Dawn of War, you're really stretched out. You have to choose where your forces go. For a map like such as Corner to Corner or Hammer or Anvil, which is this way to that way. You'll see a lot of it not really matters much. That's mainly because all your forces are kind of grouped more together and you can't really spread them out strategically, put them places. But you can still apply what you learned here today. So for melee army, I would usually deploy one truck here, and then I would deploy my big Meganob unit, my main unit that will be doing heavy damage here, right in the dead center. So if I'm losing over there, I can move these guys over there. Unless he has so many of his forces over here, I decide to leave a few guys over there and move this way. So I can trap him in this side, so he's only stuck with that objective and that objective if I can't push him off of that. How you would avoid of this is you'd probably want to put your units in a spread out position like mine. If you have two crisis suit units here and here, which is probably where you're putting your trucks, or I'm putting my trucks.
And the point with that is that even if this vehicle unit does go up here and they were able to get line of sight, he's safe to put that in a deployment that it's in that area, because it's going to take 2 activations to be able to kill that vehicle with the units inside. Meaning one unit is not going to be able to do that.
So the idea of deploying here is, since I'm a melee army, I want to heavily punish him if he pushes up, which is why I would put my Meganob unit here. So if he does have a firing lane here, but if he does try to, imagine that wasn't there, and he tried to push up here, my Meganobs here would quickly capitalize on the free berries.
Correct. So you just sacrificed a 300 plus point unit, depending on your configuration, or 60 points.
Which goes to the key value of trading up.
Yep.
Trading up in points, or if the enemy's going to score points, like game points on that.
Correct.
So a thing you want to think about deploying, I see a lot of people deploy behind cover, such as you don't need to be directly behind cover most of the time. You can be out in the open like this, knowing that you can shoot from this angle. So this terrain here is tilted like that. You would move your truck like this. No such lines of sight unless he pushes up aggressively.
And again, it's 2 activations.
2 activations to kill this truck. If you push with everything, make sure you capitalize on the mistakes of your enemy.
Now, there are some exceptions to this, such as if you're playing against an Eldari player with fire prisms, they have the ability that they can take one model and put it here, and then those models can fire through them. In that case, they can do things in multiple activations, and in that instance, you might want to take more caution or give them what we would call threat overload, where they have to choose between multiple targets.
Deep striking is that you're going to have a useless unit. I have Grenchant here to simulate our useless unit. They're going to be back here on this back objective, as any good Grenchant unit would. And they would be as stretched out as physically possible. And this would screen out as much as 9 as they can. And then you can't deep strike and take this objective.
I recommend that if you are deploying and you have a unit that can go in deep strike, you put at least 1 unit in deep strike if possible. This forces your opponent to also stretch out models that they have to be cautious of that, knowing that you can take and earn secondaries off of getting into their backlines and or taking their objective. If your opponent is sloppy with deep strike, you can take full advantage of that with the unit that is up there.
Which is a big problem. I've seen a Tau player I've recently played against, not you of course, but like they decided they put an entire 5 brick of crisis suits with a Cold Star Commander in deep strike. Turn 1, I got to go first. I played heavily aggressive. He deployed all the way forward for corner to corner, and I got a quick charge, and I screened out the whole board.
And so now they had to make a poor decision by turn 3, otherwise they lose that unit. Because you're just going to be able to deploy further and further as you control more of that board.
Yeah.
You're going to force them even more, probably in the corner that you put them in.
Yeah, because what happened was it was this way. I was all the way up here. They saw me put all the units all up here, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to use my Infiltrator to get even closer, and these units even closer. After that is I use my trucks to come out this way, after dropping the guys out coming this way, which is kind of setting up for staging. We can talk about that at a later date.
Right.
But the point is, you're going to want to have as many units as you can suck the value out of.
The other point we want to make is Infiltrators and how you deploy them. Infiltrators are fantastic screening units to be able to put in the middle, especially if they have lone operative. Things such as ghost kills are fantastic for this. There's a lot of other models out there in the Warhammer universe, but these types of models are fantastic to be able to do some screening. So 2 points. 1, if you're an army that has a lot of Infiltrators, you're going to have to choose if you want to forward deploy or screen them out. It's going to depend if you're fighting a shooting army or a melee army. If you're fighting against somebody like orcs, all you've been able to do is help them slingshot their army even closer to you and not really slowing them down. The second thing that you want to consider is if you're fighting against a shooting army, then you might want them to get closer so you can get in your threat range depending on your objective.
Or in your firing.
In your firing lane. Now, if you're fighting against somebody that has a lot of lone operative infiltrator heavy items, one of the things you can do is easily screen them out if you have your own infiltrator units. For example, if my opponent's playing Tau and I'm playing Space Marines, and I have a couple infiltrator units, I can put them down first and force and screen. Remember, they can't deploy within 9 inches of your deployment zone, meaning 9 inches puts you about here, for example, and then they can't deploy within 9 inches of another unit. So if you simply put a unit in this area, and then you put another unit in this area, depending on which way you want to herd them, you can control where their infiltrators are going, because they're only going to be able to deploy within that ability. There's another good point to make is when you're deploying, even though you can do something, doesn't mean you have to do it. So for example, if I have an objective right here, I will not put these units on that secondary. If they draw Stormhouse the objective first turn, I just made this target exactly what they need. Don't put things on objective first turn, put them right outside the objective range. Because if you have to storm the hostile objective, then your only objective you can really capture if you control the middle is that. But honestly, losing those 5 points for that particular secondary does not really hurt you if you're the aggressive army and you're controlling.
If you're the defensive player, you're losing out in stay battle lines, storm hostile objective, cleanse, deploy to Hellboat Homer, aerial denial. That's 5 easy secondaries. You miss out completely.
And we'll go through topics that we're talking about. We're going to go in more detail on defeat in detail. We'll go in more detail about threat overload, activation locks, screening, forward deployment,
Staging.
secondaries, staging. And on Tactical Tuesday, we're going to have more of these every week. And until next time when we see you
At the table.
at the table.